So before we get started, I need to clarify that I'll be using the term roguelike in this video, even though I'm describing a lot of roguelites. The reason for this is, well, there's three reasons. First is it's the far more popular term than roguelite. Second, it's the far more cooler term than roguelite. And third, I don't think anyone actually cares what term is used. So many roguelites are described as roguelikes. So to fit in with my personal belief that we should get rid of the term roguelite and just umbrella the whole category with the roguelike word, that's the word I'll be using in this video. Anyway, hope that doesn't annoy anyone. Let's get started. Let's admit it, roguelikes are awesome. Since Hades was released in 2020, my interest in roguelikes has skyrocketed to a point where it might just be my favorite genre of game. The quality and ingenuity within the roguelike genre is so consistent, I can usually pick up a roguelike off Steam and be happy with what I paid for. Of course, I have had to refund some, but more often than not, it's a game that has a unique spin on the roguelike formula, with its own individual progression systems and mechanics. But why have they become so popular and why are they so addictive? Well, I'm not quite sure why they have become so popular. For me, as I mentioned, Hades introduced me to the genre in a way I could never have imagined. For other people, it might have been a different game that introduced them to the genre. You could also speculate that the lack of quality AAA titles has made people investigate indie games a little more, a lot of which fall under the roguelike umbrella. Whatever it is, they've been booming recently, and I want to discuss what makes them so addictive, what makes them so unique, and what makes them so good. First, I want to dive into a big reason why not only roguelikes but indie games in general can receive such high praise. In an era where every AAA open world title rips off Ubisoft's formula from Far Cry 3 10 years ago, indie games exist in a different market where you need to stand out or you'll fade into obscurity. It's an incredibly competitive market, however, this exact hurdle is where roguelikes are given the opportunity to shine. The fundamental gameplay loop that consists of random generation and permanent death leaves so much room for creative concepts and systems to be developed. Conceptually, take a game like Hades, a game based around Greek mythology where you play as the son of Hades, fighting your way out of hell against your father's wishes. Not only is this an exciting setting, but it sets up the replayable gameplay loop too. Or take Vampire Survivors, a game that's main focus is on tearing through thousands of enemies, but a game that's gameplay was so unique and well fitted to the infinite replayability that it was nominated for awards while also spawning an entire subgenre. Random generation and infinite replayabilities are the pillars on which you can play with even the most ludicrous of ideas, and that is a huge part of what makes roguelikes so great. But roguelikes can also take an established genre and give it the roguelike makeover. In fact, a lot of roguelikes take heavy inspiration from existing genres, but ultimately make the game their own. Take any FPS roguelike like Gunfire Reborn or RoboQuest and you can easily see some of the inspirations, Borderlands being clear inspirations for both of those games. Take Deadlink, another FPS roguelike that has clearly taken specific inspiration from Doom. Despot's game is a fantastic roguelike that mimics auto chess games. Into the Breach takes turn-based strategy and presents you with simple to understand mechanics yet complex problems to solve, and the list goes on. Let me just put my tinfoil hat on for a moment and speculate that roguelikes are becoming more popular because they give gamers a fix of a genre that they love, but in a randomly generated, infinitely replayable context, most likely made by a development team that care about the product and one that isn't hindered by publisher demands or deadlines. Random generation is at the heart of what makes a roguelike a roguelike. No run will ever be the same, and that means coming back time after time is incredibly easy. The environments are random, the weapons are random, upgrades and skills are random, the enemies are random, the bosses, the challenge, and so much more. The RNG involved lets you know that this could either be the god run, or it could end up being a lot more challenging than you thought. Either way, you go back for a run because you know what the potential is. The core element of variety is good in any game that wants to be replayable, and luckily for roguelikes, that's their entire MO. Which means developers can have a ton of fun coming up with crazy ways to have variety and nuance within the run. Take the elements of randomness out of any roguelike that you know and it no longer becomes enticing, but it also isn't nearly as challenging. Half of the fun is figuring out on the fly how to build, what the strategy is going to be, and overcoming any adversity that the game throws your way. As I mentioned, a huge element of randomness is the rewards you get. The potential for OP reward after OP reward makes another run a very appealing prospect. But it also means that by the end of your run, you could have accumulated the most overpowered build you can think of, or a mix of abilities and weapons you didn't know worked well together. That is the magic of the RNG. Another core element of a roguelike is progression. This more often than not is what keeps us coming back because roguelikes have such a solid foundation to work on. Progression can exist in so many different ways. The endgame progression of Hades is the ability to make your game harder, whereas the biggest element of progression in Rogue Legacy 2 is constantly upgrading your castle to make the game easier and complementing that with New Game Plus levels. Progression can exist in the form of only unlocking characters and achievements, or it can exist in the form of constant level ups and numbers that never stop increasing. But progression also exists in the runs too. In fact, for some people, the in-run progression is the most satisfying and rewarding. Risk of Rain 2 is a great example of a game where the actual gameplay is so solid that you don't need progression elsewhere. Picking up items in the run and seeing your character evolve in such a visceral way is enough for some people, and I don't blame them. I have over 180 hours in Risk of Rain 2, and I continue to play it even though I've 100%ed it. And even though there isn't any form of permanent better progression like account level or anything like that. The gameplay is just so fun. Progression, whether tangible or intangible, as I said, is a core feature of replayability in roguelikes. One of the reasons we continue to come back is because we want to figure out what happens when we beat the game. What is New Game Plus going to be like? What will it introduce? What happens when I beat this boss or unlock this door? I want to max out my stats so I'm strong enough to beat the game consistently. I want to complete this challenge so I unlock this feature. All of which loop back and play into infinite replayability because, in my opinion, synergizing the systems of variety and progression is paramount. Soulstone Survivors is the most recent example of this for me. You complete an achievement and your reward is another character to play with, or a new crazy ability you can get in your runs. Progression systems in any game, including roguelikes, are also focused on giving you that dopamine hit. Some roguelikes emphasize consistently giving you that hit, like Vampire Survivors. This is crucial for any game, but roguelikes would struggle without giving the player consistent challenge or consistent satisfaction, as the gameplay is generally a lot tighter and often on a scale that needs constant refreshment. Again, and I'll keep returning to this, but roguelikes have such a solid foundation to build upon that progression is more often than not incredibly rewarding. What you'll often find with indie games is that there is a big focus on providing an incredibly fun core gameplay loop. What I mean by this is that indie games often have to put a large focus on what the game is about because they don't have the resources to produce big open worlds, photorealistic graphics, or any of the things that the bigger studios have the ability to do. Indie developers need to put resources into making the core actions in the game fun. For any hack and slash or roguelike that focuses on combat, you need to make that element the best, because that's what you'll be doing most of the time. I personally think this is a strength for roguelikes rather than a weakness, as what this means is we get a much tighter, more focused gameplay experience that can still emphasize all the other aspects that make a roguelike great. In fact, take any genre, make it into a roguelike, and I'm certain that the gameplay elements that would have felt messy or complicated now feel tight, responsive, and easy to understand. Of course, some titles will fall at this hurdle, overcomplicating their systems or failing to deliver a fun core experience. To me, a game that hit those problems was Cult of the Lamb, a game that was received incredibly well by many people. I did finish it and I'm happy I did, but the combat which you are doing half of the time felt very one note, and the camp management which you are doing the other 50% of the time felt unrewarding and flat. I would have been excited for some New Game Plus or more reason to continue playing, but as soon as I beat it, I stopped. Anyway, similarly to what I was saying before about roguelikes and existing genres, they can also take that genre and turn the expansive, sometimes overwhelming gameplay into a much more compact, yet comparably strong gameplay experience. Everything that I have spoken about in this video is on top of a roguelike's ability to tell an interesting story, explore a unique concept, develop characters, or learn about the world it exists in. A roguelike's strength lies in its ability to add layer on top of layer of depth, while simultaneously revealing more and more to the player. And I'll say it one more time, but this is able to be done so creatively given the pillars of what makes a roguelike: random generation, permanent death, progression, and replayability. The roguelike genre has never been stronger, and there are so many coming out of early access in 2023 and more being released in 2023 that I can't help but think it's only going to get stronger. I'm thankful that Hades introduced me to the genre in a way that I hadn't been before. I had been playing Faster Than Light and Binding of Isaac so much when I was younger, but I never looked past them or even considered what genre they were in. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Catch me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter. See you later.